Welcome back to Kingdom Commentary, where we discuss topics and ideas surrounding the kingdom of God, from scriptures to the early church, and how thinking through the kingdom informs wise living for our culture today.
Welcome
To Kingdom Commentary. I'm Matt Holiday, and I'm here with Josh Brindley. How are you, Josh?
Good. I'm feeling good. Feeling comfortable.
Great. It's warm. It's nice. I've been listening
It
to a
is
lot of
warm.
reggae, actually, trying to get
Really?
the spirit. Yeah, summer
Kind of
spirit.
reggae.
Modern
You have a
reggae.
beach playlist, right?
Yeah, I do.
That has reggae.
It does.
J-Bug.
J-Bug. Shout out J-Bug. Plays in Petaluma every year.
True.
Today we're going to talk about some sacrifices,
Hmm.
and specifically we're going to talk about some like a specific kind of sacrifice. And it's the more I'm doing it, that I'm actually going to teach a Bible study on this soon, and I think I'm going to bring in barbecue when I do it because I think there's a good parallel. But it's putting me just thinking about barbecue. The sun is out. I'm just like starting to get in that summer mindset. I'm going to be so disappointed when it gets cold again because it's only February, maybe March when
like-
this drops.
yeah.
But still rain. Yeah.
Depression.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
get to enjoy it for at least a couple days.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to summer movies. Watching any good movies?
I watched No Other Choice.
No Other Choice. What did you think?
It was odd.
Spoiler-free review. Yeah.
Spoiler-free review. There's a lot of interesting, like, artistic imagery that's just like you're not quite sure what it's trying to say, but it's there, and you're like, and then it's over. There's a lot of,
does.
because it's a Korean film, I think there's just a lot of like cultural norm commentaries that I just don't understand.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm like trying to get it, but I'm just like, yeah, that's probably just like something people think about, or it's like more common. People get it. That I'm just like,
If you were
okay.
Korean, you would have got
If I was
it.
Korean, I would have gotten it. It didn't really go the way that I thought it would,
Mm-hmm.
but in a good way. The people in the movie were like pretty shameless to get what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that's another commentary on the society. A lot of what the movie's about is like the work culture.
Yeah.
And like how much people are willing to do to keep their job, and how much stock they put in their job, and how that sort of like
Sort of the same
rules their life.
ethical ideas as Squid Game. Like the other
Yeah,
Korean
it's very
guys are-
similar.
yeah.
Yes. Where, yeah, it's like if you don't have a job, all of a sudden, like, your life is in crisis because, like, you live a certain life, and then once you're in debt, it's like you're just trying to catch up.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting because it also makes a commentary on, like excess and, like, opulence and stuff like that is something that I thought right off the bat, like, the way that this certain characters are introduced, they all have nice things. I noticed. They all have nice things. They're like something they're really into that they pour a lot of money into. And then all of a sudden, like, that becomes like their downfall in a way. Like, there's a certain character who invests a lot into a music setup. And the way that they approach that is actually like in the context of the music setup is like something bad happens in the context of the music setup. Or the main characters, like, they have this like really cool house. The design of the house, the places that they live, I was like, wow, I really want that house. But the main character has like a greenhouse. There's all these plants and stuff. And then in the same way, like, plants and like agriculture somehow becomes twisted in a wrong way too. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yep.
I'm trying to be spoiler free, but like there's very specific examples in which like the tools that he uses for agriculture become twisted.
Yes.
And I'm like, very interesting. And I just like in the past couple of days started thinking about that. I'm like,
Yeah.
the things that they pour their money into become like tools of destruction in a way.
That's like the movie Us.
Yes.
Peele movie?
Right. Yeah.
Everything they like end up spending a lot, like the pictures of the American dream and opulence end up being the things with which
Yeah.
they kill the other
Right.
things with.
I think that's
golf
cool.
clubs
I like
and
it.
a boat and an Alexa and like a weird gym. Anyway, yeah,
Good movie though.
I loved the movie because I had no expectations going in, and that really determines it makes a lot of like. So I loved it because I didn't expect anything, and the symbolism I thought was so cool. Even though I don't get all of it, I really like
There's
it.
definitely a couple things that I don't get.
The editing I thought was cool. He really likes those creative transitions.
Yes.
The music I liked a lot, and then I feel like it delivered on the ending that I wanted Frankenstein to deliver on. But without saying too much, yeah, I should stop. But my brother Zach was disappointed. I think
Oh,
he
really?
had high expectations for it already,
Yeah.
and because it was just different than he thought too.
It was a little slower than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
The one imagery thing that I don't get, and I think the tooth. I think there's more
Something
meaning
rotting.
behind that,
Yeah.
but I don't know what it was.
Yeah, that's fair. We could do a spoiler talk about it sometime.
Yeah.
But,
Let's get more into the law, though.
let's go. Barbecue time.
Barbecue.
I'm trying to walk a line here, and I want you to help me walk this line. And this is the line we've been trying to walk for all the podcasts a little bit. At least I've been trying to walk. Where this isn't a Bible study. If you want a Bible study, you should join your church's Bible study. Or if there isn't one, start one, because then you can go deep and you can get the words and you can you can have conversation. It should always be a conversation, right? However, I want to go deeper than just like surface level. Because I really want to dig up some things I think we get wrong, some things that I think are really helpful, some things that are practical for the church today. And all of this is just to like renew our way of thinking. Like this is sort of, I think, our podcast a little bit. I mean, I hope everyone enjoys it, hopefully, but really directed towards people in the church who are thinking these things through, maybe on a deeper level for the first time. And I want to provide a context in which we can think through some of this stuff deeper. And where you can go read your Bible when we're done talking and be like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. And then like, but what about this? And then like have to like actually like it draws you deeper.
Yeah.
And then hopefully we get resources. And I actually think this is one of the things like we are going to interview when we're done with this series, an expert on Levitical sacrifices. And he can give really in-depth explanations for some of the things that hopefully some questions that this podcast brings up. Maybe we can ask like more detailed, precise questions. And he's a professor. He wrote a book on he's legit. He's going to be like the guy if you have a Levitical sacrifice question. He has thought it through and come up with a really solid thing based on a lot of scholarship. But I don't want to get that deep. I don't want to get that in the weeds for this. I want to give one big idea, flesh it out a little bit, and then show how Jesus takes it on. So, but I want it to sound credible, so I want to prove it enough to be like walking that line. But I also don't want to get lost in the weeds. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So that's my goal for today. Not get lost in the weeds, because with biblical law and context and sacrifice, like it's easy to get lost in the weeds. I want to drive home a main point, and then see how Jesus picks it up. I want to talk about two sacrifices today, but one most of the time, and that is the well-being sacrifice. Now, if you read Leviticus, everyone's favorite book of the Bible, I actually think it's pretty sick, but I understand people get lost in the sauce there. It describes 5 main kinds of sacrifices. Or offerings. And I just want to look at 2 of them and talk about offerings as a whole and maybe just deconstruct some ideas I think aren't helpful. And the first one is that sacrifices are violent and barbaric. Because that's something I always wrestle with the kids in my class. They're like, why would they do that? They think immediately people think of child sacrifice for some reason, maybe the Abraham story. And they're just like, man,
Yeah.
I'm so glad we don't have to do that. Or maybe these biblical laws are about like you have to kill something so that you are okay, or just like, oh, there's just all these misconceptions.
I think from the beginning, though, sacrifice isn't a non-visceral experience.
It's not a
Sacrificing
non-visceral experience.
something is.
It's visceral.
Yeah, I was gonna say like sacrificing an animal.
I'm gonna distinguish though between visceral to us in modern Western society and violent.
Yeah, I wouldn't say violent,
because I'm gonna get like, okay, because I think we're a little hypocritical when we talk about this. And one, let me just throw out some terms too, because when I think people think even just the word sacrifice, they get a bunch of movie pictures in their head. They get a bunch of whatever. Like sometimes they think of rituals, like weird demon rituals where you're like killing something, or sometimes they think of like surrendering yourself for other people or whatever. I just want to put all that to the side. There's two words that the Hebrew Bible uses to describe these. One is korban, and korban gets often translated offering, right? And korban, what it means is to draw near. And they are anything, basically, it's a gift that's a meal. So think about like table culture. People often talk about like eating with someone is the best way you connect with people and be like, these are my people. You can think about like the high school lunchroom where like, who are you going to sit with? Those are your people, like the goths or whatever in like the high school movies, like Mean Girls or whatever, the popular people. Those are your people, the people you sit with, the people you eat with. And throughout history, the people you eat with become like these are the people you are sharing your life with. This is one of the most bonding experiences ever. And when someone moves into a new house, or when you like want to spend time with someone, you can like go to dinner at their house and bring food. And it's a way of drawing near to them, not just physically, but like emotionally, like in your friendship. It's just going on a deeper level, right? So I'd say first and foremost, korban offerings, they are gifts that you eat, like barbecue, that you bring to God to connect with him, like table fellowship. First and foremost. The word sacrifice is actually a less common word, and it's zabach. And it means one that you eat, specifically, one that you eat. Not one that just is for God, but one that you eat too. So that's the first idea I want to get. Israel was not the only nation that sacrificed animals. All of them did in the ancient Near East. Every single ancient Near Eastern community, civilization, they all sacrificed animals all the time. So Israel was not unique in doing that. They just did it along with everyone else. It was just unique what it meant to them. That's important too. So they weren't like uniquely barbaric. God didn't commit. It was like, it wouldn't have been a question for them, should we do this? It would just be like, why do we do this? And what does it mean? And how do we do this? Right. And then finally, if we think about it as primarily preparing a meal that you share with God, like we still kill animals to eat them in meals today.
Right. That's what I was
All
going
the
to
time.
compare to. I was like, it's not like it's different. It's just a lot of people in urban areas are so far removed from where food comes
So
from.
far removed that we think it's violent. But if you talk to a butcher or a farmer,
It's just normal.
it's just normal. They usually don't think it's
I'm
violent.
saying if you grab an urban citizen,
right,
and take them out and show them how it's done, any one of them is going to be like, wow, that is an uncomfortable experience.
it is to
Most
us, right?
people would say that's an uncomfortable
Most people
experience.
today, but most people throughout human history would feel like it was normal
Yeah, right.
because it's just
Because
the
they
way
don't
you
have
eat.
the
Yeah.
establishment of
And
all the mass
and then think about this.
food and
They had very specific, which we'll look at, ways to kill the animals that were very ethical. And they had reasons for that. The animal's not allowed to suffer. It can't be an animal that's like blemished or beat up. You have to treat it well. You have to kill it quickly with a sharp blade. Like it has to be very as painless as possible. And you have to do it a very specific way. Today, you go to In-N-Out, dude, that bird, like that cow, probably like with factory farming, with like cramming all these chickens and cows in the same room, we are participating in so much more of a violent system when we go eat meat most of the time than they are then. And it's removed from us, so we don't see it, so we act like we're not. But that's the first comparison I would say is like the way we consume food is way more violent than the way they consumed food on average, right? So it's not like we've evolved beyond sacrifice the way they did it. I think we do it worse. So that's
animals
the first.
still die.
Yeah, exactly.
In a different way.
Exactly. And so they had to kill animals to eat them because that's how food was provided. And the idea of an offering is just first at like the most basic level is that you share some with God. It's like this came from God, food comes from God. I want to be in communion with God, share table fellowship with God. Therefore, I'm going to give some to God. And there are different ones that are done different ways. So that's the basic 101, right? So the first one I want to talk about is a well-being sacrifice. And there's a very specific kind of well-being sacrifice called a Passover sacrifice. So a well-being sacrifice was a kind of offering, a korban, like a way of drawing near, that they were commanded to do to celebrate. And the closest thing I can think of is it's a Thanksgiving meal. You give thanks to God and you eat. And the well-being offering is one you take into like the temple courts and you give some to God to eat, and you burn it up on the altar. And the altar is sort of like God's dinner table. It's like this huge dinner table. And it's not about killing the animal. I think that's important. It's about the feast. It's about eating it. It's about like celebrating and eating this food together as a way of connection. And you don't kill anything on the altar. That's important too. The altar is not a place where you kill anything, just like you don't kill anything on your dinner table. That would be disgusting, right? You eat on the dinner table, and the dinner table is on fire. And so they like put a little bit on the altar, and that's for God. And it burns up, and it's like in their imagination. I don't think they thought this was literal, but it was like a symbolic act where it burns up, the smoke of it goes up into the heavens, and it's like God can eat it up there. It's like transforming it into this spiritual world, and God can consume it on God's table. Then you take the rest, and the rest has been made holy because it was in the temple. By proximity to God, it has become sanctified. And it's like God is maybe in like a loose way, like his glory has affected this food. And then we bring it to our families and we get to eat it. And it's a way of like, our table becomes God's table too. And that's the well-being sacrifice and offering. And that's like the most common offering. It's this Thanksgiving food where you give it to God and you get to eat some. And it's almost like a sacramental meal. It's like as you eat it, you get to eat something that was in the glory of God, and your dining table becomes God's dinner table. And God's dinner table is the part you give to him, and then you eat the rest. And it's like this big communal activity. And it's a feast, and it's exciting, and it's fun. And it has, like, you do kill an animal in the process. But I just want to, like, point this out. It's not about killing the animal.
Yeah.
It's about eating the feast.
Or transferring some life or something like that.
Nothing like that. Or putting your sins on the animal. None of that is involved. You put your hand on the animal because it's going to go into God's presence. And you're like, this is a gift. And I'm going to put it in God's presence, just like you put hands on people when you pray for them. You're like asking for God's presence in them. But you're like, no, this is a gift, and you give it to God, and then you eat the rest. Importantly, too, ethically, like it had to be an unblemished animal. It has to be pure because you're giving the best to God. It's like again, if you're walking into a friend's house, you want to bring him the best wine. You want to buy him cheap Trader Joe's wine. That's probably what I do. But you don't want to do that, right? You don't want to be like, here's some here's some Josh wine. You want to be like, no, brother. I want to celebrate. If this is a real celebration and I really respect you, I want to bring you something good.
Right.
And it's like, I want to bring God the best food we have. And then we're going to eat some of the best food together. And it's going to be like this meal that God eats and that we eat together. And it's like this whole like community meal with God. And it's really cool. And that's the main sacrifice they do, like all the time, is this well-being offering. So that's a basic concept, right? And again, we got to imagine ancient Israel in the wilderness. They are like, God lives in this tent, and out front, this altar in the front, that is God's dinner table. And so we are putting this thing to give to God there. And then we are eating in our tents, and it's like this community meal where we draw near to God in celebration. And importantly, too, especially in the wilderness, you can't kill an animal without it becoming an offering. Otherwise, it's murder. So again, it's not like they had a low view of animals then, and they were just killing them all the time. And now we have this high view of animals because of PETA or whatever. And we're just like, man, they were so barbaric and savage at the time. No, they were like, actually, it's murder if you kill livestock, unless you're treating it like a gift to God and you, and that you share with the community, and that you don't waste, and that you do it ethically. Then it's okay. And we just like, I don't know. I think they would think that we are murdering animals. I think we would have been guilty of murder, actually, in a biblical law courtroom setting. Yeah. Anyway, that's an aside. Doesn't have to do with getting rid of sins. Doesn't have to do with doing something wrong. It doesn't matter if you do something wrong or not. It's, do you want to eat a meal with God in Thanksgiving? And you're like, yeah, of course. And that's the point. So Passover lamb is a kind of well-being offering. It's a specific kind. And it's a kind that you do annually. And it's not just thanking him for all the food or anything. It is specifically thanking him for rescue from Egypt, right? They're in Egypt. And this is key. That's the first time they have to kill a Passover lamb, right?
Yeah.
Importantly, that is not an offering. It's not a korban, because they don't give any to God, because there is no tabernacle to give to God, and there's no altar to put it on. So it's not an offering.
That's true.
Yeah. And it takes a while to say that. It's not an offering. It's not a sacrifice.
But they do eat it.
But it's just a meal.
Yeah.
It's a meal. So God says, tonight you're going to have a meal. And it's not an offering because God doesn't get any. But you're going to have a meal. And the meal is going to, it's going to be a meal of celebration because I'm about to rescue you. And then you take the blood and you put it on, which is like this symbol of life, right? And you dip the hyssop, like mix it with hyssop, put it on your door. And it's like this bright symbol of life that God is going to protect this house from the power of death. And as death, this destroyer, goes and takes the lives of all the firstborn, these houses are houses of life that share in the meal that God asked them to do. And then it's only after that point, after they're rescued, that it becomes a traditional offering, because then after that, they share it with God every year as a thank you for saving us from death, from Egypt, and rescuing us through the Red Sea. So importantly, again, I think sometimes we can get into like, oh, that was a sacrifice, and they killed the lamb instead of killing their son, or something like that. They put this like substitutionary point into it, or something like that. But again, that just wouldn't have entered their ancient imaginations, that concept. Also, it wouldn't have made sense. It's like, every firstborn in your house, do you kill a lamb for each one? No, you just kill one for your household. It doesn't have to do with that. It has to do with a meal and then this symbol of life on your front door. Then they do a well-being offering again when they're in the wilderness and God inaugurates the covenant with them. And it's sort of like the wedding feast. It's like they do the I do, basically, where he's like, will you follow these commands? And they're all like, yes, we will. And immediately don't. But they're like, yes, we will. And God's like, I will be faithful to you. You be faithful to me. We're establishing biblical, like we are getting married. We're saying the vows out loud. And now well-being offering is the feast. We get to like eat together. You eat with me. I eat with you. And it's inaugurating the covenant. It's inaugurating this relationship. It's the wedding feast. Is this korban? Is this well-being offering? And then every year on Passover, they celebrate the covenant, and they celebrate the fact that God rescued them. And they do it by eating this meal with God. And it's this Thanksgiving meal where they share with God. They eat some themselves, and it's a celebration of rescue. And interestingly, really importantly, in that moment when they eat it, there's this whole liturgy around it where they talk about what this lamb means. And they say, we are the people that God saved from Egypt as they eat this. And it's not like my ancestors were, but it's like we are. It becomes a memorial to that event, where every year it's sort of like a mini renewal of the covenant, where it's like, I am committing myself to God and he's committing himself to me right now as we eat this food together. Across space and time. So that's the meaning of the well-being sacrifice. It doesn't have to do with sin. Doesn't have to do with purity, impurity. It doesn't have to do with atonement at all. It has to do with memorializing the rescue, inaugurating the covenant, celebrating the inauguration of the covenant, and eating a meal in close proximity with God, eating holy food that's been in God's presence and sharing it with God. And that is all the context for Jesus when he comes onto the scene. And the Synoptic Gospels all have this Passover story, where they're eating a Passover meal right before Jesus' death. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Synoptic Gospels.
Synoptic Gospels. This guy.
Yeah, I know. I'm
assuming.
Assuming. You know what happens when you assume.
Oh, there you go.
So he has this right before he dies, he purposely times, like all the gospel scholars like notice, like Jesus times his death to be on like Passover. And he has this Passover meal with his disciples right before he dies. And there he's explaining to them the significance of his death. And so importantly, we kind of talked about what his death achieved last week, where he is existing under the covenant curses, the big divorce between God and his people, and covenant death. And he's about to go into it, but he's also about to exhaust it. And he's about to, by going through enslavement to the powers up into the point of death, which is like the most that they can do, by going through the covenant curses to its extent, the most it can do, he goes through it and comes out the other side resurrected, right? With all of his debts paid, with all of as an Israelite, like the king of Israel, all of the covenant curses exhausted and now existing in covenant life and renewal and remarriage. And important, we didn't say this last time, but I feel like it's important. It's a symbolic debt to the powers, not a literal debt. Like we don't owe Satan anything. I think that's
Right.
Yeah, it's a picture of slavery, right? So he like subjects himself to that slavery, and he's about to exhaust it, come out the other side, and save Israel from the power of Egypt or the Pharaoh or the Satan or the powers again, as like this new Moses. And then he says in the Passover meal, like, this is like my body, eat it, and like in memorial of me. Very similar to eating the lamb in memorial of the rescue of the people from Egypt. And this is the renewal of the covenant in my blood that you drink in memorial of me. And from then out, the church weekly eats bread and wine every week with the theology of the Passover lamb laid onto Jesus.
Right.
So they see Jesus as a Passover lamb, but they don't see Jesus. I think we so sometimes call Jesus's death a sacrifice, and we mean a million different things by the word sacrifice, that it just becomes blurry, and what that means and why and what kind of sacrifice and why, and it just gets confusing. And to just simplify things a little bit and kind of like get like a straight line of thought, I'm kind of trying to do this in my own mind, so I'm verbalizing it. What Jesus accomplished in his death and resurrection, the disciples later compare to a sacrifice to get meaning out of it, right? But the first meaning the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, present is not that of a sacrifice. It's that of a king that embodies God going through the covenant curses and coming out the other side into life, going through death and coming out of life. Later, the disciples are like, he's kind of also like a sacrificial lamb, because the Passover lamb is a memorial of our rescue that was killed on the night that they were rescued from Egypt. And then they eat to memorialize and have communion with God and memorialize the rescue. And from then on, they start calling Jesus the lamb. And what they mean is the Passover lamb. And not that the Passover lamb had anything to do with sins. They're not talking about sins when they talk about him as the Passover lamb. But they say that he, I'm going to have to get more detailed than that maybe in a minute, but they're saying, when they call him the Passover lamb, what they're saying is when we eat the bread and we drink the wine, we are celebrating the feast of our rescue. And we get to eat these holy food that communicates God's presence to us on God's table, which is why traditionally in church history, they've eaten communion off of an altar. It's like, this is God's dinner table.
Yeah.
And we are eating the celebration, the Thanksgiving celebration feast. Eucharist means Thanksgiving, right? This celebration feast in the presence of God as his people, this meal that connects us to him in a special way to memorialize our rescue from slavery. So it's almost like a one-to-one comparison. And this is why John just goes all out, the Gospel of John, where he calls Jesus the Lamb in the beginning of it. And then he has him die at the same time on Thursday night as people are killing the lambs in the temple before they cook them and eat them. And then and this is why too in 1 Corinthians, Paul is talking to Corinthians about communion. And in 1 Corinthians 5, he's like, don't you know that Jesus is the Passover lamb for us? In his death, he died the Passover lamb's death. So let's keep the feast, which I know is actually part of your liturgy. Let's keep the feast right before you eat communion. And when he says that, he says, let's drink the bread and wine. And they see this parallel theology where, like, as the sacrificial lamb in the Passover meal for the Israelites was this memorialization of their rescue from slavery and their connection to God as they share a meal with God. They see the bread and wine as a memorialization, a weekly memorial that they gather to do of Jesus's rescue of us, not just our ancestors, but us. And this connection to God in a real way of like, this is our dinner table that we are sharing with God as we eat it.
I think it's a really good example. And I think the question that naturally comes to mind is, then where does the sin part come into it?
Yes. Yeah.
That's a completely separate conversation, it seems like.
Yeah. And I think we're going to have that conversation.
We're going to skirt a line here.
We are. But I think, again, when people think of sacrifices, very often, immediately, they'll think of this has to do with sin, or this has to do with forgiveness of sin, or that has to do with this and all that, or atonement, and all that. All those are associated with different kinds of sacrifices, right? There is an atonement sacrifice, but the Passover is not one of them. The atonement sacrifice, the sin offering or whatever, we'll talk about another time, was a less frequent one. And the Day of Atonement was was a day where you did that kind of sacrifice. And we'll talk about what that means and everything. But that was a different kind. And that wasn't the Passover one. The Passover one's about communion with God, and memorialization of the covenant. And so whenever they're talking about Jesus as a Passover lamb, they're actually very specific not to bring up atonement. And it's never, when Paul consistently talks about Jesus as a Passover lamb, he never calls him, he never relates that to forgiving sins. He relates that to communion with God and memorialization of our rescue. So one of my, I guess, main points is they're very specific about which sacrifices they apply to Jesus and when.
Yeah.
And what the purpose of them are and why. But I'm not saying Jesus doesn't forgive our sins. I think he does. But they would have thought of that as part of undergoing covenant death and covenant life. They wouldn't have necessarily used sacrificial metaphor for that. They would have used other metaphors. They would have, Andrew Rillera, who's this scholar we're going to talk to soon, he distinguishes what Jesus' death did qua death, is what he says. It's like Jesus' death qua death. Like, what did Jesus' death accomplish as a murder? And he explains that. And then he distinguishes that from Jesus' death qua sacrifice. And he is like, what do sacrificial metaphors draw out of Jesus' death? What parts? And different parts draw out different things. But the Passover lamb, whenever they use the picture of a lamb, would be the Passover sacrifice, it has to do with memorialization and communion with God and eating communion, like Eucharist. It doesn't necessarily have to do with sin, forgiveness, or atonement, because that's a different sacrifice.
What about the phrase, the Lamb of God who
takes away the sins of the world? That's exactly what I thought about from John. And actually, I think we'll talk about to Andrew Rillera about that question specifically, because he can give a really good comprehensive answer about John. But importantly, so he believes that Jesus will take away the sins of the world, and that he does take away the sins of the world. And he believes Jesus is the sacrificial lamb who will do that. And take away the sins of the world is like rescuing the world from the power of the Satan, right? That we've been handed over. Again, we use such metaphysical. It's hard because it's almost like two different languages sometimes, modern church culture and New Testament language, where sin, we think of our individual sins and putting them on a lamb and then killing it or something like that. They didn't do that in Leviticus. The only animal you put your sins onto is a goat, not a lamb. And then you don't kill it, you drive it into the wilderness. So he's not mixing the Day of Atonement and Passover. whether he's talking about our covenant curses are coming to an end. The exile of the world from Eden is coming to an end because of the renewal of the covenant, which is happening. And evidence of that is that we are about to eat the sacrificial lamb. So eating communion is the wedding feast meal. It's the banquet that Jesus talks about, like this banquet of the kingdom of God coming, this marriage between heaven and earth, this marriage between God and Israel again, this renewal of vows. He's like, I am that meal. And you are eating me when you eat this meal. It's a memorialization, and you eat it on God's dinner table, and therefore you are taking in God's presence as you eat it together with him. I know that might be skirting around the question, and part of it is, there's stuff we'll get to later that'll flesh it out.
Yeah, I think I always get all mixed up with atonement theology and like
Yeah.
all of it, because that's very complex.
It is, and I'm just trying to hit like some base again. That's why I'm like, I want to skirt this line between like, I don't want to go so deep into a Bible study when there are some things we'll flesh out one episode at a time. But the main point I want to get across today is just that the well-being offerings, especially the sacrifice of Passover, doesn't have to do with substitution. Like Jesus' death may well be substitutionary. That's a huge debate. But the Levitical sacrifice definitely does not have to do with substitution. It has to do with sharing food with God and people. Even the early church, they were very aware of this. Like Origen, he's like, it's very clear that when Paul talks about sacrifice, the sacrifice of the lamb, he's talking about a party. He's not talking about forgiving sin. He's not talking about like a mournful thing. He's not talking about something dying in your plate. He's talking about the party of the renewal of the marriage accomplished by Jesus, the renewal of the covenant. And that Eucharist is this thanksgiving, memorial, communion, table fellowship with God that happens together as we take in Jesus as the Lamb. That is the picture of the remarriage, the wedding feast, all tied together. When they ate the Passover lamb with their yearly Passover feast, they sort of connected themselves to those who first ate the Passover meal before the Exodus. And I think that's why we're supposed to connect ourselves. I think when we eat the Passover bread and wine, like take in Jesus as the lamb in this bread and wine. The early church connected themselves to the Last Supper that Jesus inaugurated on the night he was betrayed and killed, and connected themselves to the future banquet feast when Jesus returns that he promises to have. And he's like, sort of this meal goes beyond space and time. It's the one meal. It's not like a meal every week. It's actually one meal that we just participate in every week that ties us to our past, to our future. And it's a celebration of the renewal of the covenant that Jesus has brought, the cup of the new covenant, the feast of the remarriage, of the renewal of the marriage. And so I just think that's important. When lambs were killed, it didn't have to do with sin. That was goats. Yeah. When lambs were killed, that had to do with feasting and celebration, and memorial and communion. And that's the idea behind it. It's the feast.
And next time we're going to talk about goats.
Yeah, next time we'll talk about goats. The goat. Jesus the goat. Wow. But yeah, I think it's significant. Jesus didn't die on the Day of Atonement. He died on Passover. And this is the primary sacrifice Jesus gets compared to, especially when talking about his death. Paul never compares Jesus to any other kind of sacrifice, really. If anything, to a drink offering, like a drink that you'd give to God, and then this is another kind of sacrifice, like a gift that you give to God and a gift that you have. And then the other thing, Paul doesn't just compare Jesus' death to a Passover offering. He compares his whole life to a gift given to God. He's like, his whole life is an offering to God. It's a gift to God that creates our connection. And then he does, especially the death, and resurrection, his gift. But then he's like, and we can be living sacrifices in our bodies by saying, like, as we connect ourselves to Jesus, by taking in Jesus and participating in Jesus and having Jesus' Spirit in us, our whole lives become gifts given to God that allow us to commune with God.
That's part of the liturgy too. Sacrifice of praise and thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Like lived out.
Yeah, we get to become part of Jesus' sacrifice as we also give our lives as gifts to God, just like he gave his life as a gift for us. So it's about gifts. It's about communion. It's about memorialization of this marriage, and that's the point of the Passover lamb. Briefly, I'll talk about one other kind of sacrifice just for a second, but I think we can go through it. It's the burnt offering, because that's one of the most consistent in the Old Testament is the burnt offering or the going up offering, and that is very similar. It's just that you don't get to eat any of it. You give the whole thing to God, and you burn the whole thing alive. Not alive. Oh my God, that'd be terrifying. No, you burn the whole thing. You burn the whole thing.
Okay.
Dead. You kill it before you put it on the altar. Again, you don't kill things on the altar, because that's the dinner table. You just give it all to God, and He eats the whole thing. And again, they didn't think He was literally eating anything. Even in Psalms, they're like, God doesn't have a mouth. He's obviously not really eating these things. But it's a symbol of communion with God. And usually, like Noah does the burnt offering, way before the Levitical system is even there. It's just giving a gift to God as a way of like thanking Him and drawing near to Him, but you don't get any. And it's sort of like, again, and that was probably the most frequent one, really, because that was the first one you did when you go to the temple, and it's the last one you do when you leave the temple every time. And I think, again, it's just like the temple is like God's house, and you're going over to someone you respect's house, and you bring them a gift, and it's all for them. Like, here's a bottle of wine. You guys enjoy it some other time. You know what I mean? And it's, I think, in some ancient imaginations, they argue it was a way of keeping God in the temple. It's like, please stay here because look, we're drawing. Doesn't this smell good? Stay here. In like an ancient imagination, it might be a little bit of that. I think even more is just a gift for God, and it doesn't have to do with sin. It doesn't have to do with. I think sometimes people get confused when people give offerings in the Old Testament because they assume they're all connected to forgiving sin or something. When they're like, but no, it just has to do with here's a gift. You're welcome, God. I hope you enjoy it. It's the best one we have, and then you do the other ones, and you're like, that's just our starting gift, and then here's the gift that we share in a meal with you, but this one's all yours. That's the going up offering. And I don't think Jesus is ever compared to a burnt offering, but He is compared to the sacrifice one most consistently. Interestingly, too, this is one last point. Just like we were talking about, like they would not have thought of the Passover sacrifice as suffering or like as violent. And there's even a butcher who recently wrote a book on Leviticus, where he was just like, he has a lot of good insights. It's really cool because he's just like, oh, this is right up my alley. This is what I do all day, And he's like, some people think this is like primitive, but like, no, this is what I do all day. I like chop up and then we eat it, and I don't think of it as violent just because it's like it's my job. You can't make a lamb suffer before you kill it. That would have been unethical, right? Because it's supposed to be a pure gift for God and for you to eat together. You can't like have a blemished, like painful one. And the animal suffering is not the point. Like it's not about him suffering and dying so you don't have to. It's just a gift to God that you share together and stuff like that. And so whenever Paul or someone compares Jesus to a sacrifice, they make sure not to mention Jesus' suffering because it doesn't make sense. They're like, it's not the point. When it comes to the sacrificial meal, that would have been like an unfit sacrifice. If it suffered, if it got whipped before, you couldn't offer it. So I think that just goes to show this is just one picture that they're using. They're like, and it's not comprehensive. It's not like it's not like the people were expecting we need a Passover sacrifice to restore our relationship with God. It's more like we need God to restore our relationship by saving us from these powers we're enslaved to. And then we can celebrate and inaugurate the relationship with a meal. And Jesus is saying, I am saving you. And then separately, I am the meal that celebrates it as well. And that's what the Passover metaphors, when they're referring to Jesus, are about.
It's complex.
It is. But that's why I'm going to bring barbecue. I'm like, I'm trying to like get away a little bit from when it comes to Passover and well-being offerings, get away from the idea of like, this is your substitute death or something, which is just not in Leviticus, right? It might have to do with another part of Jesus' death or whatever, but it doesn't have to do with Leviticus. And just go to like, they thought of this as like a barbecue with God. It's your cookout with God. Like, and that's like the joy that you get with that and all that. And that's what we should be thinking about when we take communion, is like, this is our communion with God and each other. This is the thing that bonds us together. This is the renewal, the celebration of the marriage, of the renewal of our relationship with God. and all of that comes with that, and this connection with God in a special way, that you get when you eat food with somebody. That's the main point I want to get across, even if some other things get lost.
Mm-hmm.
Now I want barbecue.
That does sound good. I haven't had barbecue in a long time.
Yeah, you gotta figure out how to ethically source our meats.
This is a side note, but just based on the conversations that we're having, I think gatherings in Western culture are less food focused than gatherings that would have been in the early church.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
The gatherings, or like the times that I felt like most like connected with the people that I am gathering with, are always meals.
Yeah.
When
I mean,
people
it's-
are like, I think like Christian like couples or whatever, groups of people, when they like have like they're good hosts,
Yeah.
I always feel like a special connection because they really care about putting something together that people are going to enjoy, that is like, I don't know, like life-giving, I guess, or good for communion. And they put a lot of energy into that. In a weird way, I almost feel like ill-equipped because I feel like I'm not necessarily the best host, but I really do value it. So I'm like, maybe I should, not only just from like I guess just like it's nice to be able to post, I guess, socially it gives you more opportunities to just be like connect with people. But also, like you said, it's the identity of the church is to have meals and like be in communion with one another. And if that's how people have been doing it, I'd see no reason to like stop doing that. But I think as a product
like
of our
you said,
culture, we're a bit more
we don't
individualistic.
I mean, it's pretty normal now for a family to like when they make dinner, eat it on your own time while
Right,
watching a movie,
exactly.
not necessarily talking to each other at a table. And that's so foreign to most of the world and most of history,
My family over time, depending on like the different circumstances. Well, I grew up always like we were always ate together, but then I remember my grandma came to live with us and she had Alzheimer's, and it was harder to eat all together because she would just do some funny stuff.
Yeah.
And we became more individual a little bit. And I think as we grew up too, we were all like, me as probably a teenager wanted more time to myself. And I didn't see it as important to gather together. And so it slowly kind of became a little bit more individual. So we used to have all the food on the dinner table. And when my grandma came to live with us, because she was like really kind of picky and odd, we would then put the food on the kitchen counter and then serve ourselves and bring it to the table. That's a very like contrasting idea, is like taking the food, serving yourself versus passing the food around the table itself, which I think we associate with like big gatherings like a Christmas or a Thanksgiving dinner. It's almost always on the table most times. Not always, but in my context, I feel like those are the kinds of times where it's like we all share from the beginning of putting the meal together to the end, is like all on the table. And that's just like a different, I don't know, it probably depends per household, but central idea of like feasts and meals and things like that, I really do appreciate. And I'm like, this is like really great. There's something that you experience within a meal with people intentionally that you wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Communal meals.
Yeah.
I enjoy it out or at home or whatever.
Yeah.
It's fun.
I'm going to be thinking about this now when I take communion this week. We'll talk about other kinds of sacrifices next time, atoning ones and what that means. And yeah, thanks for listening. Please leave a review. Please share with a friend and let us know what you think. And check out bonus content on Patreon. We'll talk about divorce a little bit more. We'll answer some questions and all that. And we look forward to it. Yeah. Goodbye. Thank you so much for listening. We would love to hear from you. If you have thoughts or questions from today's episode, please feel free to reach out and email us at info@kingdomcommentary.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or rating wherever you found this podcast and send it to a friend. That helps us a lot. Kingdom Commentary Podcast is a 501c3 nonprofit supported by listeners like you. If you'd like to support what we're doing or become a patron, sign up for our Patreon and get exclusive access to bonus content, or go to kingdomcommentary.com/give to make a donation. Finally, Kingdom Commentary is co-hosted by Matt Holliday and Josh Brinley and produced by Will Coons. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.